So this is Santa Cruz's brand new electric mountain bike for 2025. It's called the VALA. There's a couple of really new things. First off, it's got the brand new, just released Bosch Generation 5 motor that's got loads of refinement, and we'll cover it in a little bit more detail. And it's using a more traditional shock layout of 4-bar compared to their traditional VPP linkage that Santa Cruz are renowned for and they've been using for like the last 20 years. So a couple of radical different changes. The first time it's using a Bosch motor. Let's take a look in a little bit more detail around this bike, and we'll go for a first ride and I'll tell you everything you need to know. So one of the biggest things by far is their move from Shimano to Bosch. Now I think Bosch have been perhaps the leaders in e-bike tech over the past couple of years. Now the power from the Bosch motor, the delivery of that power and the smoothness has been outstanding. And this new Bosch Generation 5 motor has been completely redesigned. Looks very similar, but it's been completely redesigned inside. It's a little bit lighter by 100 grams. And crucially, there is way less noise on this motor. They've completely decoupled the internal kind of crank spindles into the motor when you're coasting. Now the new one is virtually silent. So there's no clatter and rattle and noise that you get. Motor backlash, it's called, from the motor. When you're hitting roots and chunder and rocks and that kind of stuff, it is completely silent. The noisiest thing on this bike is the shock. I can hear the shock working through the travel, and that's pretty amazing. That's something to be said about how quiet this bike is. There's a big chunky chain protector. There's getting rid of all that chain slap, but it is so nice cruising down a trail and just hearing the tyres on the dirt and the suspension working and not having a motor in the background that's making a lot of noise. Now the motor is still 85 Newton meters of torque and 600 watts of peak power, but they've refined the sensor technology in there. And it is so smooth and so reactive to pedal input. They've got some incredible sensor technology that it feels like, as cliched and as cheesy as it sounds, an extension of your own kind of leg power. It's very, very refined. And although there's a ton of power on tap, it doesn't feel overwhelming at all. It just feels like you've got loads of power available. And climbing loose, dusty stuff, like super loose stuff, you can put in these very fine levels of torque input through the pedals, and it gives you a very like nuanced feel and very controlled feel, especially over climbs. It's really difficult to spin up the back wheel, which means on climbs you don't get wheel spin and it doesn't feel uncontrolled. It just feels like a very, very refined motor system. So it's 100 grams lighter, it's all new inside, it's much quieter when you're descending, and it's quieter under power as well. It's not silent under power, you can hear a little whir of the motor, but it's quieter than before. A regular 4-bar layout on a Santa Cruz. Never seen anything like this before. Normally the shock is slung low, the shock goes under the seat tube, and they're kind of renowned for looking like Santa Cruz bikes. This doesn't look like a Santa Cruz, a traditional Santa Cruz. That 4-bar layout has been introduced into this bike for two reasons. First reason, Santa Cruz say that the configuration of the motor didn't allow for the kind of clearances that they wanted with their regular VPP. There wasn't enough clearance around the motor to get it designed how they wanted to. Reason number one. And reason number two is seat post insertion. Now with a shock that goes basically through the seat tube, you're limited to the length of dropper that you can get in there. And we're riding longer and longer dropper posts all the time. A few years ago, it was like 150, then 170, then 200. This has got a 240mm dropper in it. And you can see how low I'm able to get that. That's as slammed as it will go. It won't go any lower than that, but it's really low considering that the kind of height of that 240 dropper is really long. So they've been able to get dropper posts in here, really long dropper posts in here without having like loads of stack height there. So a 210mm can get completely slammed, a 240mm nearly slammed. They also are keen to point out that actually it's easy to make a 4-bar, but to make it well is not easy. There's a colossal amount of possibilities for different kind of positions for that 4-bar, so it's not easy. And they actually modelled 60 different versions of this before they were happy. The suspension engineers have modelled it and made prototypes and made a ton of different variations to get the suspension tune they wanted. And their goal really was to get it to feel like a Santa Cruz bike, but you know, it looks different, but the ultimate goal was to get it to feel like a Santa Cruz, handle like a Santa Cruz. And they claim that by making this specific design here, they've been able to get as close to that as possible. I think aesthetically it looks amazing. The lines are really clean, it all works. It looks superb in my opinion, and I don't think it looks like a big bulbous full power full fat e-bike. In fact, standing it next to the Heckler SL is very difficult aesthetically to tell them apart. Now this has got a fixed internal 600 watt-hour battery and this big powerful full power Bosch motor, and it weighs 21.5 kilos, and the margins between superlight e-bikes that are built to a burly spec and this, which has got gravity tyres, got Fox 38, it's kind of like a burly build. The margins are closing, and this has got a 600 watt-hour battery and a full power motor at 21.5 kilos. It's pretty impressive. Now this is interesting, look at this, it's got a blanking plate around here. Now I can't get any secrets from them, but if I was to speculate, I think something's going to change with this in the future that the end user will be able to change out. And I'm going to speculate again, I do not know, and if I did I wouldn't be able to say, but I think this is going to be a screen that goes on here in the future. And this is not the only e-bike that's done this. There's a few that have been out really recently that have got this kind of space here for something. Now it's got the mini LED remote just up here, super neat, really compact, Bluetooth wireless, no display on this bike, which means it's really clean. But imagine a little screen there, that would be really cool. I suspect there's a little screen or something coming that integrates that system controller with something that looks neater than that, because honestly it looks a bit unfinished. It is unfinished, so I think that would be user replaceable if you got this bike. I reckon that'll be like a plug and play upgrade that you might be able to do in the future. And we pull into the back office. So super clean 4-bar linkage and a nicely CNC'd link here. And what we got here is a Float X shock, a trunnion mount which has got a 60mm stroke here, and you've got a couple of flip chips on this bike. There's a progressivity change flip chip here, and it changes it from a less progressive to a slightly more progressive tune on that shock. Now what that would mean is if you want it to feel a little bit smoother off the top, you could put it in the more progressive setting. It's going to be a little bit more floaty off the top and a little kind of more comfortable, and it's going to ramp up through the travel. Or if you wanted it slightly more linear, a bit more controlled through the entire stroke, you can change that. It's super quick and easy. And then there's a flip chip just out the back here, and you can do this trail side as well. You don't need to take the entire bolt out, just loosen it off, and you can slacken the bike by it's just around 0.5 degree. It lowers the BB slightly, and just kind of makes it slightly more stable, steepens the seat tube angle. I actually tested it in the low configuration, and you can notice a slight difference. 29er on the front, 27.5, 160 travel, Fox 38, 150 rear. Now this 600 watt-hour internal can run the range extender as well. So you can get up to 850 watt-hours of power if you put on a range extender. So range-wise, if you're curious, I did a 3-hour ride yesterday. That's 3 hours of complete moving time on Strava. And I did 41 kilometers, it's about 25 miles, and 1,160 meters, 3,800 foot of elevation. And that was using mostly eMTB mode and quite a lot of the turbo mode as well. And towards the end, when the battery started getting a bit low, I dialed it down to the blue mode, which is like the Tour Plus mode. And the range is pretty good. That was 3 hours of total riding time and 1,160 meters just around the Santa Cruz area. Got some amazing trails out here, so it was a really good kind of test bed. Really dry, really dusty. But I was impressed with that range, considering it's got 600 watt-hour battery, and if you wanted a bit of an additional range, the range extender is going to give you another 250 watts, so maybe another 40-50% on top of that. Personally, I don't like carrying extra range extenders and stuff around. I think they just add more hassle, more things to charge, so I'm quite content with taking this out with a 600 watt-hour battery. Now Bosch have just released an 800 watt-hour battery as well. This can't fit it, it's just a fixed size. You can see how slimline the down tube is. It's only accommodating that 600 watt-hour battery. And we did ask them about the 800, why they didn't choose that, and they just said, look, they want to keep the weight down. A lot of the rides that riders are doing are like 2 to 3 hours, and I've just done a 3-hour ride, and they're right. You can do a decent 3-hour ride, and it keeps the bike weight down. The 800 adds nearly another kilo to the bike weight, and their kind of goal was to keep the bike feeling light and nimble, but still having like the full power and still allowing decent ride time, and in a bike that weighs within a certain range. So to get a 21.5 kilo full power bike with a 600 battery and be able to go out for a few hours and just blast around in the higher modes is pretty impressive. So we're running Schwalbe's radial tyres. It's funny seeing a Santa Cruz with that yellow Maxxis logo, but this is running Schwalbe's Magic Mary in the new radial carcass. Super soft or ultra soft compound on the front, 29 by 2.5. Pretty decent. It's tough when you're riding a new bike with new kit on to really single out a tyre, but these have got really great reports. It's using Santa Cruz Reserve wheels and SRAM's Maven brakes, which are colossally powerful, 200mm rotor, and they're brilliant. The SRAM Mavens are fantastic brakes. Fox is 38 with a grip X2 damper, 160mm. Lovely clean looking cockpit. Oh, something I noticed, I've never seen this before. This is SRAM's new paddle shifter, which is a lot more effective and a lot more, I would say, ergonomic, in my opinion. It's personal preference, but this is really nice. I like this. It's like a rocker paddle, but it's got a button on the back, so you can press that to change. Nice. One Up is now part of the Santa Cruz brand, or the PON group, should I say. So they're using One Up components. Yeah, and this one, like I said, comes with a 240mm dropper post, 240mm. And that is as slammed down as it will go if you're curious. It's still pretty low. And the seat tube height on this is 460 on an XL, which is not bad. It's not the lowest, but it's pretty decent. Now they are using size specific chainstays. So between the small and the XXL. And Santa Cruz say they want to keep the bikes riding the same across the sizes, the frame sizes. In my opinion, they're not completely balanced. So they don't have the same front and rear center proportional geo across them. They need to make the rears a little bit longer, and my personal preference on this bike would be to have a longer rear end. Having ridden it a bit, I found that I needed to kind of consciously load the front wheel. You can see the Bosch motor just neatly tucked down there, a little kind of plastic bash plate and cooling fins to let air flow into it and heat dissipation just around here. Bosch have also completely redesigned the motor in terms of its thermal capacity, and what that means is it's less prone to heat up. So on extended climbs like 1-2 mile climbs, 1,000 foot, 500 meters or whatever, it is less prone to heating up. Now you might not notice it when you ride in a regular e-bike, but they do deregulate, and what that means is when they start to get hot, they kind of reduce the power output, reduce the newton meters and reduce the watts just gently. You might not notice it, but they do that when they start to get warm, a bit like a computer will or a phone. It starts to go into that mode where it starts restricting, like the screen goes a bit darker and it has to cool down. Same with this really, it starts to get warm, but they've completely redesigned the thermals on it and it's much better at heat management. So there's less kind of down regulation of that motor, or derating of that motor, should I say, under power, which means you can do extended climbs and still get near on. I've seen the charts, it's near on full power. It does taper off slightly, but it retains its original capacity of 600 watts and 85 newton meters for a lot longer than the previous generation motor. SRAM exo cranks, you can hear the back crank, the kind of ratchet in it, but what's gone is all that rattle from the motor when the chain grows through the suspension. There's no clatter on there at all. It's a great job. So this is where the charge port is. You can see there's no plate on here. This is just for, I don't think Santa Cruz wanted to show off. They were testing bikes with Bosch, so they just took this on, but so it hasn't got the actual Bosch plate on here, but all production ones will have the Bosch logo on there. Little charge port just down here. Here's the rear brake hose just going into the rear seat stay just down there. So I think a fantastic looking bike. I love the clean lines on it. I think the industrial design team have done a great job on the aesthetics and the look. And I've not ridden a huge amount of Santa Cruz bikes, but this rides really well. I think this ticks a lot of boxes for a lot of people. 150, 160, trail, all mountain bike, Bosch motor, super refined, really quiet to ride. I found the front a little bit light personally on the XL. I'd like a longer rear center. I do prefer a longer rear end. On the bikes, I've got quite a long torso, so when I'm kind of going down and hitting flat corners, my waist, my hip hinge is quite far back, so I'm quite rearward biased personally on the bike. I don't have huge long legs. I've got a longer torso in relation to my overall body shape, so I personally find I like a longer rear center, but I think this will please a lot of riders. Ticks a lot of boxes and a superb looking bike from Santa Cruz. Thanks for watching. Let me know any questions down below and subscribe for weekly e-bike content, and I'll catch you soon.